welcome to all the participants. At the onset of this dialogue, I want to clarify two things, that where I am coming from and why we are talking about climate justice and sustainable development for pastoralists and commoners, basically, for pastoralism and for commons. One is that the pastoralism and commons. Pastoralists per se, they have established themselves as people engaged in, pastoralism as a production system, and yet the kind of international dialogues that are taking place, and this is one of the production systems and land use and grazing strategy, which has established itself as a very sustainable livelihood, using the natural resources in a very efficient and dynamic manner. And yet, the overall discourse that we hear and come to know, and the parlor of discourse on climate change, we find that pastoralists and commoners are having a very little space. And that's what I am coming for, because if we say that pastoralism also offers ecosystem restoration to some extent, it is, though it may be controversial issue, but then it has to have like a production system which offers a solution. And so therefore, it has to have some space in this. Therefore, we wanted to start with this climate justice and sustainable, we wanted to look at climate justice and sustainable development. Next slide, please. So whatever I'm going to talk about, there are two bases for it. One is the very recently completed field-based study in drylands of Kutch of Gujarat state, and the Kutch-based pastoral communities like Rabari, Jat, Sama, and Raima. And the second premise is that I have started looking at pastoralism and the commons or the common property resources from different angles, like property regime and common property resources and justice. And then when we say justice, intelligent with rule of law and rule of law and so on. So so these ideas are still under formulation and the process, and yet we feel that it is very necessary to talk about them. So my first submission is that when we look at climate change discourse as a whole, it is largely or it is overwhelmingly in an apocalyptic nature, where it says like it's going to be end of world, it's going to be a threat and challenge to the human survival, and so on. And so therefore, the solution that we talk about are largely in terms of scientific and technological. We also talk about climate stabilization, which is largely, again, a top-down approach, focusing on carbon per se, and then use of fossil fuel, and so on. So we really need to sort of keep in mind that can we start something which is with bottom-up approach, and that's where I'm coming from. That if we look at commons, the commons per se has a good has made a good inroad for sustainable development goals and debate related to it. But in climate change discourse, it is still to occupy it is still to make inroad. And there are still many things to be verified and checked whether it really I mean, what about carbon credits and so on? And I'm also using this climate resilient development pathways, which is promoted by IPCC, and its limitations. But at the same time, I am using framework given by Singh and Chudasma, which says that there are fuzzy cognitive mapping and fuzzy cognitive logic, which can sort of strengthen this discourse. So I'm using those fuzzy cognitive mapping for elaborating climate justice. Next, please. So what I want to sort of share, I may come quickly when we talk about this field-based study and the learnings that we had from this. But I would like to now go back, go to the next slide and talk about what is the framework for this presentation. And there are 6 important issues. The first, as I said, that the climate stabilization focus mainly on the carbon, I mean, it's a carbon-centric discourse, plus it is sector-specific. So if you really see, 70-80% of the debate takes away by the energy sector per se. And therefore, I think, the other sectors and other production systems and other livelihood strategies have very little scope and space for the in the existing climate discourse. The second is the commons and the common property resources. Our property regime is largely getting, when I say our, it's Indian property regime is largely getting into private property regime and more on agriculture and so on. But private property regime basically focus on the ownership, and there the land rights or land governance system that we have, the land rights which include other than ownership, the access and control and management of land and users' rights, or we call it usufruct rights, they are really undermined. And we are able to see that that earlier we came to know, we were knowing very well that in many tribal regions, many tribal communities hold pata land, and they used to use it under that as pata land itself. But these systems are now either reducing or diminishing under the canopy of land record digitization and the property regime that we are talking about. So therefore, the tenure security is not thought of in the given climate change discourse. So if we really, I'll come to it when we talk about what FAO and IFAD wants to talk about when it comes to land tenure security for the migratory population. So a third thing is the use of resources. So when we look at climate change discourse, along with this top-down approach, it is largely focused on the urban and the sedentary population. And that's where the migratory population and their protection of rights or their ability to restore ecosystems are really undermined in the given discourse. So when we talk about the fourth framework is the climate justice, and when I said rule and rule of law, it's the regulatory mechanisms that we talk about. We also want to talk about the conservation regime, which is largely a state-specific, because when we talk about pastoralists, in India, many pastoralist communities live in forests. For example, in Gir forest in Gujarat, Van Gujars in UP, and so on. So when we think about forest conservation, wildlife conservation, and biodiversity conservation, the forest laws and the wildlife laws that we look at, they are very punitive in nature and very prohibitive for pastoralists. in nature. And that's where we need to sort of think about that when the legal regime for climate change is opening up, which has still been very limited to international trade and sector-specific issues, we really need to sort of think about the sustainable livelihoods perspective and how this role of law that can be enhanced for pastoralism as a production system and a livelihood strategy. When we look at climate justice discourse, especially by Mary Robinson, she is one of the pioneers. She's considered to be one of the pioneers in upholding this discourse. She talks about two things. One is the human rights approach, and the second is the common but differentiated responsibility principle. Now, when we talk about human right approach, we know that human right approach is largely individual-centric. When we talk about pastoralism and pastoralist, we need to sort of have social justice approach, which is community-based. These are the submissions, and I have already talked about as such pastoralism as a migratory population, and so therefore the kind of land governance system that we need to have is different from the sedentary population. One, the kind of land rights of the common dependent people and especially pastoralists, we need a different framework for the same. So these are the 6 different ways that I am approaching the discourse to climate justice. Next slide, please. And these are the submissions. So let's start talking about it in detail for a while. So if we just look at the UNFCCC and IPCC framework, framework for convention for climate change, then again, like they mainly talk about unusually high or low temperature, frequent droughts, storms, floods, rising sea level, and etc. Whereas for pastoralists and common users, rainfall is the most important part of it. Because the forage and the water availability are the major concern. Many cattle and many breeds are still able to take the high temperature variation, and they are protected by pastoralist traditional medicinal practice through when there is a very low temperature. So they feel that that is manageable, but for them, accessibility and availability of water for cattle is the most important part. And they are very clear about that the grazing usually helps in restoration of the ecosystem, especially the vegetation and the biodiversity that we talk about. Next slide, please. So these are the contrasts that I just want to sort of highlight in the thinking in the given discourse. Similarly, when we talk about climate resilient development pathways, because it is a top-down approach, the kind of climate narratives we hear, again, it's with the threat and challenging tone. Second, the kind of values and ethics that it talks about, it is at a very different level compared to the way pastoralists and some such common dependent communities use the way they use natural resources in a very dynamic yet in a very efficient manner. The partners and the commitment, if you just look at the IPCC 5th and 6th report, it is still very vague about partners and commitment, and it is still at the level of international, national, but it has yet to come down to the subnational and various sectors other than the energy. And similarly, the dimension of governance that we want to talk about, when we want to sort of come to the climate governance coming from the community or anthropological perspective, then the policy, institution, and practice are very important to be examined and to be used for the alternatives to be provided for the climate governance. And in there is no space for community in the given climate justice discourse. Um, as I already said before, that for pastoralists, migration is a way of life. And so migration provides an opportunity for using the dynamic use of natural resources and efficient use of natural resources. And so therefore, there is a possibility that we are able to talk about the ethics and value of pastoralism, which can contribute to effectively dealing with the climate variabilities, and also the kind of land governance model, because one of the argument is that the low carbon agriculture is talked when low carbon agriculture is talked about. One of the argument is that the agriculture and along with the pastoralists, which has a symbiotic relation with agriculture and the farmers, one of the argument is that they eat up a lot of carbon in the soil, and that's how the destruction of carbon takes place. But that is, again, I feel we do not have adequate field surveys to prove this. And until that is proved, I think we need to give a chance, to give an opportunity to look at how pastoralists and the commons dependent people are able to restore the existing ecosystems. Next, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So when we talk about climate justice and law, next slide, please. So I want to focus on this 2x2 matrix, which is very, very perplexing. And we are able to realize that there are unsettled issues as far as climate change and law are concerned. And when we talk about pastoralist and common dependent people. So when we say then that there is no directly pastorals, or there are no there are no specific laws for climate change in India. And as such, both are, if we really look for the direct connection between the pastorals and climate change, they are not directly covered under any existing law, and the laws are evolving. So this is still, we need to sort of look at it. But when we look at the existing laws and the laws that are largely falling to the conservation regime, and for forest laws or wildlife law, they are purely punitive in nature for pastoralists. They are prohibiting pastorals to enter forest areas, protected areas, and also that is how they feel that the wildlife conservation will take place. But time and again, my study on the Gir forest has shown that time and again, if we really want to continue the wildlife conservation and the cycle of the food consumption by herbivores and carnivores and so on, it is a very healthy system that the pastoralists are able to offer and contribute to. So we really need to look into, and also the biodiversity conservation law in India that talks about community participation, but that community is again a sedentary population, which is talked about, and then pastoral per se have very little scope to contribute through this biodiversity protection law. The third is I want to talk about the judicial verdicts. The only judicial verdicts that I have seen, I have come across, are mainly by the National Green Tribunal. One is related to the Banni grassland, and another is versus Kandla port and the salt industry, where they have protected rights of pastoralists for conservation of forest land and conservation, their land rights. So, but other than that, if we really see, all the judgments are varied. So, after Niyamgiri judgment, that is from Odisha, and tribals having right to manage the forest lands. Other than that, most Supreme Court judgments are not supporting some such activities. And therefore, I think we really need to understand that what are the normative rules and regulation, and it's a kind of, we really need to think about the top-down and the bottom-up approach, so that pastoralists can be included in this in discourse. Next, please. I quickly I'm just quickly winding up my presentation, and these are the questions that we can think about, we can still discuss about, and so on. Next, please. Yeah, so that's that's my submission, that let's continue this dialogue, expanding the discourse on CC through pastoralists and common dependent people. Thank you. I invite Ovi to join now.
Thank you, Dr. Ganguly. That was an amazing introduction to the topic. Welcome everyone once again. What I'm trying to do in the next few minutes is providing a couple of examples from ground. One of them is from Kutch in Banni that Dr. Ganguly spoke about, and the other one is from Kashmir. I'll just share my screen. Yeah. So to begin with, if we try and think about climate change and animal husbandry, there is a kind of a cycle in terms of discourse on climate change that is happening. We all know from the recent documentaries on the livestock sector or the news, or from listening to climate change activists, that animal husbandry has been blamed for contributing to climate change. So that is one direction where there is increasingly there is this stronger idea of animal husbandry as being bad to environmental health. When it comes to number, we know that it's around 13 to 14% of contribution that comes from livestock sectors to climate change. And that's why I do not like these numbers as much, because they tell only a very small part of the story. So that's one direction where we know that animal husbandry is blamed for leading to climate change. And the other direction that I wanted to talk about is how climate change itself and the discourse of climate change is impacting animal husbandry. And we know that climate change does have an impact on pastoralist lives and livelihoods. It can give rise to loss of pastoral lives in terms of forcing change in livelihoods, or making it even difficult to migrate or survive on areas that get affected by climate change. Secondly, we also know that there is a lot of talk happening about how pastoralist systems are very resilient, how pastoralists can adapt to the changes in their surroundings. And in fact, some of the Indian systems of pastoralism are given as examples of these adaptations to climate change. Yeah, so the second thing that I spoke about earlier was animal husbandry impacting climate change. And as we know, that often results in, as Dr. Ganguly said, a lot of top-down rules and regulations. And one of its recent impacts have been cutting down on uh, livestock farming. Recently, I was in a series of meetings under the global agenda of sustainable livestock. And we got to know about the situation in Netherlands, where the Dutch farmers are protesting. They are in distress because for years they have followed a very industrial mode of livestock farming. But now, due to these rules related to the climate change discourse, they are expected to cut down on the number of livestock that Netherlands currently holds. And they are getting hit very hard. On the other hand, we also got to know that the average age of a Dutch dairy farmer is 65. And that is also the case in many parts of Asia, where it's mainly the elderly and the women who are in livestock farming, and increasingly the youth are leaving this kind of way of life because it has become so difficult to continue it, given the increasing amount of restrictions and challenges. So this is a very broad picture of where pastoralism and climate change intersect. I will directly go into the two examples. First is from Kutch. Now, if you look at how climate change has been impacting Kutch, like many other places, it's predicted that it's going to be hotter and wetter by the end of the century. And if you look at this small graph below, it shows that the rainfall has been increasing over time. Given the landscape is like this, what you can see in front of your eyes, it's a very flat, low-lying kind of a landscape. Imagine what increase in rainfall can do to it. You have increasing incidents of floods happening, and there is also drastic change in vegetation patterns that takes place along with this change in water availability. This picture is from Bunny Grasslands. It's one of the well-known or very popular landscapes known for pastoralism in India. Some of you might have also come across this place in news and documentaries and reports about how the Maldharis, the group of pastoralists in Bunny, are struggling to claim their rights over the Bunny grasslands. There are more than 20 different communities in this grassland, distributed all across around 3,500 square kilometers, right next to the Pakistan border. Today, I want to bring to you an example from one of those communities that Dr. Ganguly also mentioned, the Jat community. And they are one of the most migratory or the most mobile of groups from Bunny grasslands. Here are some pictures. In the lower corner, you can see a house that is built on stilts. It's called Pakha. And the Jat community is known for having such houses because they often live in areas that get flooded during monsoon. So the houses has to be such that the water doesn't reach till the bedding and the housing. And at the same time, they have to be easily dismantled so that people can take their belongings and move away from flooded area quickly. In the background, you can also see the Bunny buffalo. It's a breed that was registered in 2011, and since then has become quite famous for its abilities to survive in desert while still producing a good amount of milk. But also with it comes this long tradition of breeding and knowledge on livestock keeping from the communities. So to give you a bit of the history of Bunny, for a long time it has been on paper a protected forest, and the rights of the communities living in Bunny were never settled. In the recent past, in last 10 to 12 years or so, people along with the NGOs have started claiming rights through FRA. And there are various things happening. There are also scientists involved, there are government agencies involved, and everyone is negotiating over land use and land rights in this part of the world. When it comes to conservation, there are also a lot of things happening. There are working plans that are being introduced, there are experiments that are being done. But when I spoke to this group of judges and asked them about how they feel about what is going on, they said it's okay. There is, we can see forest department is trying to do something. The scientists are trying to do something. There is a lot of importance given to our breed. There is a lot of glorification of our buffalo. But yet, the simple things that can help us continue our lives are not there. So the judges are asking for two things. One uh, is just a tar road that connects from their settlements to their monsoon migratory sites. The monsoon migratory sites are hardly more than 12 kilometers away, but when it rains, if they don't get out of the area quickly, they stand to choose a lot of they stand to lose a lot of livestock due to flooding. More than the droughts and summers, it's the rains that end up killing livestock in Bunny. But they do not have such a road because it's a protected forest, and their demands are not being heard. Second thing that they have been asking for some time now is rights to their monsoon grazing sites. These sites are in another panchayat, so there is always this worry of losing access to those areas, especially when Bunny is increasingly getting fragmented. There is increasing insecurity over land access and land rights. So these are the two simple things that they are asking. And but there is not much being done along those lines, and it has become increasingly difficult to face the challenges that increasing flooding brings to this place. So this example I wanted to talk about to say that rights issues are intrinsically linked to climate change discourse, especially when it comes to pastoralism in India. And we cannot even begin to think about this topic unless we go to the core of the rights issues that we have right now. The second example that I wanted to share with you is from Kashmir. And I came across this group of Gujar Bakarwals by a chance event. We got to know that a family of Bakarwals living in the outskirts of Srinagar needed some help with blankets and other things in winters. I was kind of new to the landscape. I'm still new to the landscape of Kashmir, but when I got to hear about it, we thought of just going and checking what it is about. And we got to know that there is this group of around 12 families living on an empty private plot. The owner of the plot has been kind enough to give them this place as well as a water connection over more than 10 years now. And there are many such families all around Srinagar. And they have been living in the city outskirts for many years now. So when I asked them why, what made them choose this place or this city, they said that they had no other choice. They are part of thousands of families that were displaced when the Kishan Ganga Hydel Power Project was established. Now, this example I wanted to talk about to to point towards impacts of climate change discourse that take place through infrastructural intervention. Hydel power projects are increasingly getting popular because they are considered good. They are considered as green alternatives to, say, fossil fuel. And there are more and more such projects being established. But on ground, the people who get affected are often the already marginalized, the poor, and the people who do not did not have any power to resist those changes or resist evictions. We also spoke to an activist in Kashmir who said that there have been more than 600 evictions in just last year, connected to different projects that are in some way connected to environmental protection. If it's not a hydropower project, it's a compensatory afforestation project site. So this pattern is something that we have to be aware about and speak more about. And so this is example of not how climate change itself, like in its biophysical form, uh, impacts pastoral communities, but how the policy and political economy that gets driven by climate change impacts the community. Interestingly, when I spoke to this group of people and asked about if they still keep sheep and goat, they said that they have stopped keeping the traditional sheep varieties because they cannot survive on the city outskirts. Some of them still have a few goats for household consumption and a few sheep that are sent out also for migration during summers. But it's interesting that they have changed the breeds and they are opting for more of cross bred sheep varieties and aiming at the meat market in the city itself. On the other hand, I just spoke about local examples, but on the other hand, you have these very simplistic but extremely powerful ideas related to climate change. Many of you might have already heard about this concept of planetary boundaries, which helps us understand where the tipping points of our planet are and where we are pushing the ecosystem too much. Based on calculations, we know that 4 of these boundaries have already been crossed. But the problem with this this kind of a framing is that it leaves out the social justice and rights related issues. To respond to that, there are some attempts of bringing in the social elements, like we have this donut or the economic donut model that was also introduced as a response to the idea of planetary boundaries. But yet we fall short in including the complexities on ground. And as a result, there is a big mismatch happening between our ideas and understanding of climate change, the interventions, and the realities on ground. Now, I want to stop with 2 questions, one of which is how can we think about global commons if we don't work on local commons? One of the authors of the planetary boundaries idea, Rockstrom, has spoken about the idea of global commons. How should we be treating Earth as a commons, and how that is the answer uh, for the climate change related issues. But if we are not able to manage our local commons or the commons around us, then how can we even think about global commons, or how can we think about that level? And it's of course connected, and the work starts ground up, as Dr. Ganguly said. And as I said, secondly, there is a mismatch between the global discourse and on ground interlinked realities and property regimes. My work in Bunny showed that it's not just the commons, but also the private and the government lands that pastoralists are connected to. We have these amazing examples from all over India where pastoralists have close links with the farming community, how they are also dependent on agricultural land, as well as that, there is connection also to protected areas or to wildlife itself. So we have this rich, complex interlinkage and landscape and system on ground, but the very simplistic discourses of climate change are not able to incorporate that richness and complexity. And we are still lacking a connection between these discourses and on ground realities. And as Dr. Ganguly said, that is also one of the reasons why our interventions are mainly technology centric, and why we are falling short um, in tackling issues related to climate change and pastoralism. So with that, I think I'd like to stop, and I'm looking forward to discussions further.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sajal. Sajal, you can begin.
Yeah, thank you, V and Dr. Ganguly. So I don't have presentation, but I will share my experiences with pastoral communities where I am living. I am based in Nagpur, and in Vidarbha we have around total nine communities who are practicing pastoralism or agro-pastoralism. So what I'm going to speak, or I am sharing, is my experiences with those communities related to climate change and how they are really coping up, or how they are practicing climate change. So basically, pastoral communities are real, I will say, real practitioners, and what they experience, they practice their understanding of biome, understanding of climate, weather, everything, and of course their animals, uh, and accordingly they take the decisions of management of their stocks. And yeah, it's in their day-to-day practice and evolve in their lifestyle, that how and where to graze their animals, or when to breed the animal. Like we have one example in Marathwada, in Nanded district. The Banjara lady from a Tanda, it is my experience from last 5 years back. She has not bred her cows in a drought period. I asked her. She told me that I will I will allow to get them pregnant during uh, say midwinter, and they can after that uh, they can give birth to their calf during next monsoon. So such type of practices they uh, do. They manage their stocks according to the climatic conditions. Another example I will give, the Dhevriya community from Kutch has came here in Vidarbha 50 years back. And one of our Dhevriya Rabbari Patel, Mr. Mashru Rabbari, he told me few months back, साहब इस साल 3.5 बारिश होने वाली, तो आधी बारिश पहले होगी और 3 बारिश बाद में होगी. What is this? So first, on the set of monsoon, there will be a gap, and patches of monsoon showers will be there, and after that there will be a three major showers which may lead to flash floods or floods. Out of that, what I am observing is two already has been happened here in Vidarbha. So these are their observations, like where to start migrating, where there is a good fodder. They say our animals will tell us when we have to start our migration. When they when they start grazing in the direction of good grassland or where monsoon has been started, uh, we follow them. So following and basically practicing with the help of their native breeds, their indigenous breed, I think is a more resilient practice, day-to-day practice to cope up with climate change. In a way, their knowledge of grasslands, migratory routes, water, cropping pattern, uh, ultimately reflects in their day-to-day, means their lifestyle, and what they are doing, they are contributing to our food systems. So in my as according to my understanding, pastoralism or a pastoral community are live observatory for climate observations and climate reading, and we don't have that much understanding, that much knowledge, or I will say data on pastoralism, which is a what always Purnendu sir always tell us, it is a non-equilibrium mechanism of living. What we are imposing or what we are designing is a standardized model of equilibrium living lifestyle. So here I have means I am requesting all academicians, all practitioners to understand more and more into such kind of system for resilient mechanism and coping up with climate change. They also change their breeds according to the landscape, or where, like Bharwads from Saurashtra came here in Vidarbha area in Maharashtra 40-50 years back, like Devriya Rabbari I said. So they have changed their Gir cattle according to the forest area of Vidarbha. Like we have deep forest, and Gir cattle needs to graze in these thorny or deep vegetations. So they said that their ears get infected during monsoon. So we change our animals according to the short, what we can say, short length ears. And Saurashtra breeders don't consider these animals as a gear. So these are the difference we are observing. Same thing with Dhangars, they keep 4 types of rams according to the weather and according to the vegetation available. They breed the ewes, and next generation is more resilient to climatic conditions of that region. So these are the decentralized models of mitigating with the climate change, and I think this is a more challenging field for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you all for such an insightful discussion on the pastoralist experience of climate change and how it is located in the current climate change literature and sustainable development discourse. We now open the discussion to the audience. You can either unmute your mics and pose a question or put up your question on the chat. For those of you joining us live on YouTube, you can put up your questions on the comment section. I think we have someone who's already posted a question for Dr. Ganguly, Mr. Satyanarayan. He says, Lots of grazing land has been taken under land bank, including Lanjigar blocks of Kalahandi. So what steps should be taken by the community or CSOs? Can you see the question? You're on mute, Doctor.
Yes, thank you for the question. There is no ready-made solution as such, but therefore I'm asking what I have put forward is that we have started fighting cases for land rights and use of common property resources. And if you remember 2011 judgments of Supreme Court regarding the commons and how we need to protect commons. So, and that judgment is still very, very valid for all the pasture lands and all the commons that are in India. So we need to really find out avenues that which law, which regulation, which government scheme or which development scheme, which is violating the rights of commoners or including the pastoral. So there's no ready-made answer that this is step one, you can do this, that, but yes, if we really want to undertake legal battle, we need to do that. Second is the policy framework, that we really need to build up the bottom-up policy framework for the kind of land governance that we want and the land rights that we want for the common dependent people, including pastorals. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. There is another question. I don't think it's directed at anyone, but the question reads as there is traditional practices of pastoral management by the community, which has no written policy and also is not recognized by the government. How can we recognize it?
So again, it's a very similar answer, but there are two more avenues that we can explore. One is every state has animal husbandry policy. And as far as Gujarat is concerned, I know that the smaller animals, that is goat and sheep, are not covered. But anything happens to the larger animal, that is cattle and cow and buffalo, then the government provides necessary financial assistance and also for the fodder at subsidized prices. So similarly, so using all this, whatever is done, we really need to put up different cases together and try and make a policy, or try and make making a policy and also start advocacy for the same. That's how I understand the justice part of it and the rights regime that we have been talking about. Thanks.
Thank you. Ovi, Sajal, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, can I add?
Of course.
Yeah. So the question is basically, are we really recognizing them? Starts from that. And we have a potential biodiversity act with us. And under that, we can basically do the documentation part first, and then those practices, those traditional knowledge points can be considered under policies. And what Dr. Ganguly said it is true that animal husbandry department or state departments really don't know or really don't have demands. Actually, it starts from the demanding for pastoral communities. All the schemes and all what the programs or investments are for stall fed animals or the organized farms like that. So it starts from basically the using Biodiversity Act, the documenting the biocultural protocols like that.
Thank you, Sajal. Ovi, anything to add?
No, I feel similar. We also have examples of biocultural community protocols that are used in various places, especially where FRA struggles are going on. But I think the way we understand what written policy is and what management policies are and what pastoralists use on ground is very different. The way land is managed is very fluid, flexible. So in such a situation, rather than having a written policy that is fixed on paper, what might matter more is providing the space for the communities to take decisions. So it becomes more of creating a platform where the power can be exercised rather than having written policies or recognized policies. That's what I feel.
Thank you, Ovi. Kaushal has
So-
asked, sorry.
Yeah, before we go to the next question, I also wanted to add it, which I missed the second point, is that, in Gujarat, we have a philanthropic activity for taking animal care. And that is called Jivdaya, and that is specially by the Jain community, which is been practiced. So they start Panjrapol, that is keeping all the old and sick animals and feed them. And they ensure that good quality of life until their life gets over. And I think that's another philanthropic activity which we all need to sort of encash upon. We need to build networks, alliances around this so that the kind of hostility which prevails for pastoralists. For example, I tell you a very, very simple example that we are from urban areas, and the moment we see cattle walking on the roads or cattle sitting on the roads and becoming one of the causes for traffic jam or traffic disturbances, we are so intolerant. We feel that how come these people are using their roads? I mean, our roads, kind of thing. And that, so if we really dig it up, then we realize that it's the private property regime that is been so mainstream in our minds as well. I think we really need to understand those kind of things, that how do we build civil society organizations, getting into alliance building with philanthropic activities. And so not just say state-centric, but also some kind of awareness activities, which may definitely help to recognize their rights and then, of course, do something collectively. Thanks.
Thank you. No problem. I think it leads to another question, which it relates to what you commented. Kaushal asks, how as a common citizen can we help such communities other than working in NGOs that work with them? Any of y'all can take it.
Sorry, I missed that. Can you please repeat? It's there in the chat.
I'll repeat. How, as a common citizen, can we help such communities other than working with NGOs that work with them?
So actually, I combine the answer that how do we look at pastoralists is the crux of it.
Sure.
If we look at them barging on the common resources, then we definitely feel very hostile towards them. But at the same time, when we know their contribution to the economy of meat, milk, and manure, and how they help us in restoration of ecosystems, biodiversity and other things, then I think we start feeling that humble that we are not able to recognize them for their contribution. I think so. At one level, awareness, second level is acceptance, and the third level of is the allowance of pastoralists to practice the livelihood that they have been practicing.
Okay, the next one is for Dr. Ganguly. What kind of specific information needs to be collated for us to address the land rights for pastoralists? Will AH in-depth study on natural sciences at scale be a valid evidence? This is from Bhavna Rao.
Yes, there are two important things when we talk about land rights of pastoralists. One is as I said, other than the ownership, their usufruct right. That means the land that they are using, the rights as users need to be established. One, and so therefore we refer to the forest land. And under Forest Rights Act 2006, we are able to have rights of community forest conservation and management. But that again is very limited. But in the revenue villages, FAO, that is Food and Agriculture Organization, and IFAD, these are the two organizations that have studied pastoralism and their land governance system, especially from the point of view, the tenure security. So that is one way to establish their land rights. The second way is what is suggested is in-depth study on natural sciences at scale would also definitely make a difference. And FES, Foundation for Ecological Security, has conducted 2-3 such studies that how commons are able to generate not just restoration of ecosystems, but also a source of good livelihood. Also that there are sessions in the ILDC, that is Indian Land and Development Conference, over last 5 years. So if you are able to look at some of the sessions you have to search probably YouTube or internet. And if you are able to get access to those sessions, you would be able to understand how this commons have been the providers for various type of rights, including land rights.
Thank you.
Nantara, you're on mute.
Oops, sorry. Thank you, Pooja. Yeah, so Mohit has sent me a direct question, a direct message. So I put it on the chat. He asked, communities like Banjaras, Garia, Laur have been traditionally engaged in interstate livestock trading. Bulls from Rajasthan used to be taken to the farmers from MP, Gujarat, Maharashtra. Due to restrictions on livestock trade and traditional cattle fare, large stocks of stray cattle, especially the bulls. Is this unproductive stock putting pressures on common pastures, competing with the productive ones, hampering regenerative capacity? Ovi, Sajal, any of you want to take this? Dr. Ganguly. The question is, I reposted it in case.
Yeah, this is true. That keeping basically earlier no one was keeping the non-productive stock, or there is nothing like non-productive animal for pastoralists. They are very much smart what type of animal they want to keep and what type of flock they have. So because they are the entrepreneurs for that product or that commodity, and what the basic gap is, even Indian academicians, Indian policymakers don't focus or don't promote the meat economy. We have fear of meat. Sorry, uh, I don't want to go into that, but most of the shepherd community now keeping stock for meat, and most of the large ruminant keepers, they are keeping animals for milk, and they are shifting from the indigenous breed to improved breeds. More sedentarizing thing are happening. It is due to the means unattended or unattended uh, practices or non recognizing the pastoralism.
Thank you, Sajal.
I think we need to have a perspective on that. Are they really unproductive? One of the participants also has asked a counter question that do we really consider them unproductive? One. And second is the earlier that, see, it is a traditional livelihood system. And earlier, having the symbiotic relationship with agriculture, all these bullocks, especially bulls, were used in the farming, especially for plowing. And so therefore, they were not unproductive. But if we really see productive in that sense is that pastoralists have a very good practice of maintaining a good breed in the sense that every 3 years they change the male counterpart so that the inbreeding is avoidable. And that's the way they have maintained good quality breeds of anything, every type of animal. That's my submission. And the second part is that they pastoralists also know, Sajal talked about it briefly, that pastoralists also know how to maintain their flock size. And that's another way to maintain climate variability, because they know that this is the flock that they have to maintain with availability of the available natural resources, especially the water and forage. So somewhere pastoralists are very, very concerned and very well aware about the resources that are available and how to use the maximum use of it. And so therefore, I don't feel saying that these are really unproductive and unnecessarily wanted animals, that they are the burden on eating up the natural resources. My concern of the continuation of this argument is that this is perhaps the reason that we are losing donkeys as a good breed, because now and camel also, the number of camels which has reduced in Gujarat, especially in Kutch, from 25,000 to about 2,500 to 3,000 to 4,000 maximum, mainly because donkeys and camels have lost their market values. Right. And so therefore, if we really go back to the fuel use and emission and the pollution that has been created, and the reason, one of the reasons for global warming, we really need to look into the use of these animals for transportation purpose. And so I don't want you to take all of you back to the slower transportation and so on. But yeah, I mean, they had their value, and I think they still hold some values, but otherwise these breeds will become extinct very soon if we really consider them unproductive and unwanted in that sense. That's my submission.
Thank you. Ovi, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, on the same question, as Dr. Ganguly said, there are different uses of these animals that are thought of as unproductive and left. In Australia, there are now examples of people taking up using horses rather than tractors for transportation at the level of the farm or at the level of local economy. But the unfortunate thing is that we have stopped using a lot of these animals, whether it is for consumption or farm work. To give you, and the other thing is that there is so much of fear around meat, as Sajal pointed out. To give you an example, I was talking to someone who had a herd of large livestock, and I asked him, "What is the oldest animal that you have?" And I had this, as a young researcher, this romantic notion of people knowing their animals and keeping them till they die. And he said, "No, I don't have very old animal. There is one who has completed 7 rounds of birthing, and she is called Wazanwali, which means she's the one who will be sold based on her weight." And that has been part of pastoralism too. But with the current politics, we are increasingly afraid to touch on this issue. And on the other hand, pastoralists are also finding it very difficult to manage this change that is taking place.
Thank you, Ovi. Yeah, so I think Vinod has asked the next question. He says that how globally pastoral communities are protected by law vis-a-vis India. Can you throw some light on it? I think this was directed to Dr. Ganguly.
I think pastoralism is practiced in almost 36 countries, and each country is struggling for three common things. One is land rights. Second is the migration and related problems. And also the pastoralism as a production system or a traditional livelihood. And that's one of the reasons why all the three are being sort of the activists, the people who are concerned about rights of pastoralists and the academicians. They are also putting up everything together to enter the policy regime. And I think that's the most important part of it, because largely the marginalization and invisibility of pastoralists is a major concern. So, and one more thing that I have observed, I'm not very sure whether I'm right, but the struggle right now is global north and global south. The pastoralist countries largely belong to the global south. And so the kind of marginalization it has witnessed on many other aspects of development paradigm, and the international frameworks like SDGs and climate change. This is also one of the epitome of global south problem. Global north is facing different kind of problem because of Alps and so mountain pastoralism, for example, is something that has been not at a larger scale compared to the global south pastoralism. So if we really put it in a very global south and north, not in a very dividing terms, but yes, the avenues, visibility, and other in the context of avenues and scope and visibility, we really need to understand that these are the three avenues: land governance or land rights, migration, and other problems. I mean, access to resources. They really require, and vis-a-vis the conservation regime, we really require different kind of efforts and policy regime for pastoralism and commerce.
Thank you. Maybe we'll take two more questions and wrap up. I think Mitali has asked, what kind of knowledge can we give PVTG groups to maintain good health of domestic animals? Sajal, Ovi, any? Dr. Ganguly.
I really don't know what you say. No, sorry.
Okay, no problem. We can move.
Can I
Sure.
add?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there is, see, the basic gap is there is a knowledge somewhere and there is a need somewhere. We need to bridge up that. So that can be done. We have like I read that message about PVTGs. From last 2.5 years, we are working with PVTGs in Wardha with Tribal Development Department. And my experience is they are more knowledgeable than us. They are more, they have more acceptance of new things, like simple thing of vaccination. Vaccination to the goats twice a year. And when they realize this is important, they themselves are doing now. So means giving knowledge from top to bottom. I think the horizontal relationship is more important now.
Thank you.
As far as knowledge is concerned, I always find, and Sajal has discussed about it, that how the rainfall has been talked about by pastoralists. And we realize that the biodiversity knowledge and the knowledge of forecasting rain and managing health of cattle is something that we really need to learn from the pastoralists, because they know how the ecological balances are maintained. They know that what kind of food system that can be stabilized with having how many number of animals and what type of animals. And also we when we did the recent field-based survey that we took, from that we learned that they have about 40 different ways to forecast rainfall. And if we really categorize them, then they can look at the natural elements like looking up the star and nakshatras and the color of sky, and they will say whether how much rain will be there. They look at the birds and animals' behavior and they say that when and how much rain would be rain can be expected. They look at the breeding of trees and plants and the creepers, and they can say that how much rainfall and what kind of rainfall would be there. And so that knowledge is unbeatable. We have a habit of getting into scientific evidences. And we say, no, but look at meteorological data and their forecast. And sometimes we say that, no, but they don't match. We forget in that argument that meteorological data, Department of Meteorology, when they provide data, is very generalized in the sense that it's not very localized. While the pastoralists know the local ecosystem so very well, that they know that even if they migrate 10 kilometers ahead of their destination, there won't be any rain, or what kind of vegetation there would be available, and what kind of crops that the farmers would be taking. So the kind of micromanagement abilities of pastoralists that we witnessed during this recent field survey is amazing. And therefore, I have been saying that the kind of knowledge systems that pastoralism as a production system and a livelihood strategy offers, we really need to go for the bottom-up approach rather than the top-down approach, which is more technological in nature and very constricting.
Thank you, Dr. Ganguly. One last question from Natasha. She says, I find that Indian academics and development sector are reluctant to talk about or support meat. How can we address this? Without economic viability, we would lose the ecological benefits. Open to Ovi, Sajal, and Dr. Ganguly.
I don't know about the academics in general, but yes, what we have witnessed is that the pastoralists are not open to share their idea about meat economy. We all know, and we had personal relations with some pastoral families, and they will tell us in confidence that yes, meat economy is very, very strong because that's where we earn money. Otherwise, manure and milk economy is something that gives us a good earning, but not as much as the meat economy. Meat economy from pastoral's viewpoint also need to understand is to maintain the flock size and based on the availability of resources that they have. The present ruling government is also, the kind of messages it has provided, and I agree with Professor Purnendu's observation about the North India and the South India. Probably North Indians are more antagonized when we talk about meat and meat economy compared to the Southerners. So I think we need to take cognizance of all these aspects, definitely. And we also need to sort of, especially this is catering to academicians, that the kind of meat economy that we talk about in the Western part of it, and which is more like poultry, this is Indian economy, Indian meat economy is very different from the Western one or the other countries, I would say. And this Indian specificity, how to bring it out in alignment with pastoralism is a challenge, but it definitely is one of the areas that we really need to explore further.
Ovi, Sajal, any last concluding discussions?
Last question, I think I said about it.
Okay,
That
thank you.
We have not recognized the non-equilibrium method of living. And about animal husbandry, related to animal husbandry academics, we are in Marathi we call it popat panchi, like what parrot speaks, like that. So it starts from the foundation. It starts from the zero. What exactly pastoralism? What are their animals? Uh, Animal husbandry or animal scientists never see the community, or the anthropologists are not addressing the animal, like that. Although there is a separate department of zoonosis, there is a separate department of animal genetics, but who are the people who are breeding those animals? Like 96 or 98% of meat in India coming from that economy. 80% of cattle breeds are from pastoral system. Buffalo breeds, except the one famous breed of Murrah, all other breeds are from pastoral systems. Goat breeds are from pastoral system. We are using them, but we don't understand in which system people are rearing them. This is the gap.
Thank you, Sajal. And with that, we come to the end of the session. Thank you all for joining us for this enriching discussion. And a special thanks to our speakers for sharing their experiences in the field. To actively initiate or participate online on discussions around commons, please do sign up on the Indian Commoner website and join our community. And for daily updates, please stay tuned to our social media handles. We have put all the links on the chat box for your reference. Have a great weekend ahead. Bye-bye.